Welcome to the Run Radio podcast. My name's Trina Wilcox. Today on the Writer's Room, Erin Riley joins us. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Trina. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about a subject that is very important for people to know the signs of, and unfortunately, you've experienced what this is all about. So tell me how you put into a book and recognize the signs finally about narcissism.
Well, honestly, Trina, I didn't know that narcissism was a real thing. Call me naive, but I always thought that the phrase narcissism, it's so overused, right? I thought that people, you would just say about your micromanaging boss, that person's being really hard on you. Like, oh, she's such a narcissist, but I didn't really honestly believe or know that it was a disorder. Not unlike schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder. It really is a clinical diagnosable disorder to some degree, and not diagnosable by a brain scan or a blood test, but by behaviors. So it really is kind of, it's a little bit difficult to put it together. There are different ways that narcissism can sort of manifest itself and present itself. And it's real easy to see what's known as the grandiose or overt narcissist. That person's coming at you, boasting about how great they are and how they're the best at everything, right? So you see that coming and you're like, all right, all right, buddy. But a covert narcissist will have the same mindset. And when I talk about mindset, what I mean is somewhat opportunistic, somewhat transactional and unemotional, thinking about how they can get what they need out of an interaction with a person. So while these people who are narcissistic, but in a more covert presentation, are interacting with you, they're studying you. They're studying you and your behaviors and your wants and needs and your weaknesses and your fears, so that they can then collect all that information and make sure they keep the upper hand in the relationship, right? But if you are not that kind of a person that thinks that way, all along, you're going to be thinking to yourself, they're so interested in everything I have to say. They're hanging on my every word. Yep. Yeah. So that's what happened to me. I did not meet a covert narcissist until I was 40 years old. So yeah, that was surprising to me. But I was well conditioned from my dysfunctional childhood to be somehow recognized and targeted by one. So I just got lucky that I didn't meet a narcissist until I was 40. But anyway, so that's I decided to try to figure out how that happened to me. I was a very independent and strong and successful in my career with a lot of friends, and had a good deal of self-confidence, more so than I think some people have. And I was pretty successful. So I thought I was kind of good to go, and but little did I know, like I said, everybody's got their little injuries and their hurts from their childhood or whatever traumas or, emotional things they've experienced in their lives. And I was, of course, one of them. And so I was vulnerable to being what they call love bombed by a narcissist. That's the phrase they use, because when a narcissist, somebody who thinks like, opportunistically and transactionally in a cold kind of a way about another person without empathy, when they meet a person with a lot going on for themselves, they're like, oh, I could get that. I could get that from myself. So if you have a big career, or if you have money, you have a house, you have a lot of friends, you got a big family, they're like, I want that. How am I going to get it? So they play into all of your, what they think you want to hear, and they follow you, they mirror you. Suddenly they're telling you they have everything in common with you. You think, oh, I love that too. That's my favorite movie too. And you start feeling seen and heard, and, as though you may have met your soulmate. So if that happens very quickly in a relationship, I say, take a step back. Take a step back if somebody's coming on that quickly at you, because they may want something from you rather than to get to know you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So this happen to you in a personal, very personal, intimate relationship?
Very much so.
Okay.
I worked in the music business for 40 years. So, and I was in radio. So I know you're in radio. I was a radio DJ and a radio programmer. So I know a lot about radio, and you've been in the music business or in the radio business for a while. So, you're going to you're going to run into some patriarchal types of, situations, or some misogyny with women. Even as a radio DJ, we weren't allowed to have two women DJs back to back. Why? Who knows? We're allowed to have male DJs back to back, right?
Mm-hmm,
So, I was somewhat conditioned, even you couldn't play two female artists.
Yes.
Back to back, right?
Yep. Heard that a lot.
Right. So I would think to myself, all right, well, this is just, this is eventually going to change, but, this is just the way of the world. Women are still struggling to be seen and heard and be taken seriously and whatnot. And I kind of accepted that. So that kind of is part and parcel to, how I was raised and how I dealt with being in the music industry, which was so male dominated and whatnot. But then when I met my husband, so my husband is actually my second husband. My first husband was alcoholic. I was able to actually divorce him because it was clear to see that he was alcoholic, right? Couldn't help him. My second husband, while he was still, had a lot of, he wasn't a good husband for me. He sure seemed like it. He presented himself in this way that was very helpful and very supportive, very reliable, very safe. All the things he actually wasn't. So that's I met him on Match.com in 1999. So what is that? 25 years ago now. It's probably the first year of Match.com. And like I said, second marriage. I'd been single about 3 years, and he just seemed like the nicest, calmest, most helpful, reliable, somewhat shy guy. And after all the years of working in the music business with all these loud, whatever, assertive men, I thought, you know what? You don't know how to pick the right guy. Seems like a better choice for a husband, somebody that's going to just sort of stand by you and not compete with you. Right. Yeah. Well, it was an act. It was an act. And I fell for it because I was ripe to fall for it. So yeah, this is a marriage. It was a marriage that lasted 20 years.
Really?
And I was not aware that I was dealing with someone so disordered for the first 17 years we were together.
What was the light bulb moment?
Well, it got pretty bad toward the end, but I had it on paper. We went to our maybe 6th or 7th marriage counselor after never being able to get our relationship working well. And this one was an older male gentleman, and not so easily manipulated, perhaps. Maybe had a little more experience. And on our at our second meeting, this gentleman said, something doesn't add up here. You two seem like really intelligent, nice people that should be able to work out a relationship. Let's do psychological testing. There's my answer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
that
I got
many
lucky.
Therapists and counselors, and nobody recognized it beforehand, or at least said so.
Nothing even close. In fact, I look like the problem. I always look like the problem because I'm the emotional one. I'm the expressive one. I'm the one that has the anxiety and all that. And I'm communicating that in this sort of frustrated way. But he this or this, duh. And then my husband would sit there in the therapy session and look at the floor and say, but I just love her. I'm just trying to make her happy, and I don't know how. I just do everything I can. My whole life is trying to make her happy. And the therapist would, they'd be jealous. Sometimes the female therapist would be like, what's wrong with you, lady? He just wants to make you happy. Right. So
how did he receive the information? How did he feel about that?
That's a great question, because that was one of the biggest surprises of this situation. Right. He got his report back. I got my report back. My report looked as though I was a little on the codependent side.
Okay.
And so I've come to learn that I had some work to do myself, but his was just downright terrifying. It said he had no capacity for love, that he was sadistic, that he had high scores in borderline personality, he was dependent, he was suicidal. There were so many like extreme phrases. He had delusional disorder, like all of these just terrifying, not only just words that were popping out from his psych report, but actually the narrative, basically was saying this guy is not capable of love. This guy is constantly telling me, but I love you, but I love her. But if you're not capable of love, the answer is no, you don't. You need me. He needs me because a narcissist needs somebody to project their internal misery upon, right? They need it. They call that supply. I think that's a bit of a cold term, although I guess from a narcissist point of view, maybe that's the way that they would see it, but they need someone in their life to help them regulate their emotions. They are very out of touch with their emotions, and they generally have a very deep sense of self-loathing. So they use all their little tricks to deflect that, the projection where they'll accuse you of doing whatever it is they're doing, or blame shifting, or keeping you just kind of like off your mark. So you never really feel like you understand what's happening, and you think it's you.
Right.
When you get gaslit and somebody tells you you're crazy or that didn't happen, a normal person might question themselves, with a little humility. Gosh, I thought I said that. I was sure I did, right? Yeah, so of course you did. So that's something I want to communicate to your listeners. If anybody ever tries to deny your version of reality, right? If somebody says that didn't happen and it did, get away from that person. That person is doing that intentionally.
Yeah. So when he got the results, was he upset? And how did you feel hearing that these are the characteristics of the person that you care about?
That was the weirdest thing of all. His response was like shoulder shrug, like, oh well, they got me. That's me. And I was terrified. So let me tell you a very important aspect of what was happening at that time. We'd been together at that time about 17, 18 years, and we were getting ready to retire to a beautiful Caribbean retirement home that we built on an island off the coast of Panama. Right? So 8 years, we built this beautiful custom home together. And the relationship was getting worse and worse and worse over the years. But he kept promising me that it was all the work we were doing in our business and the stress, and he couldn't wait to retire to a beautiful place where he could just be peaceful. And that's what they call the cycle of abuse. In any kind of an abusive relationship, there's the love bombing stage where they're coming at you. Then there's the devaluing stage where they have less respect for you because, God forbid, you're a human being. You might actually have a flaw or a need or a criticism. And then they will discard you, and then they'll hoover you back, and it just keeps going like that. You've heard of those types of relationships when it's a physically abusive relationship. Well, that applies as well, in a psychologically abusive relationship. So he would tell me that he was going to be happier in Panama, and that our relationship would be what it always could have been or should have been. Right.
Okay.
And I wanted to believe, I had so much invested, a marriage, a lot of money, my dreams, my whole life's work was invested in this. So when I saw his psych report, I was frightened, to say the least. And we each had a private meeting with a psychologist after to discuss both our own reports and then our spouse's reports. And the psychologist told me not to go to Panama. He said, you could be hurt. He could hurt you. My husband was dissociative, not all the time. I would say once every 4 or 5 years in an argument, he would just almost go away. Like I'm dealing with the Incredible Hulk or a werewolf, where suddenly he's not in the room anymore. He's like a 15-year-old. He's like a child that's having a traumatic experience. And he's not there and he's not reachable. And I would just let those scary moments pass. And then he'd kind of come back around. And I kept saying to myself, oh, once he's not under so much stress, that
Right.
won't happen. Okay. So don't tell yourself that,
Yeah.
trust your gut, people. That's the most important lesson that I've learned, is that everyone has an internal compass, like a radar system in them, and it's right just about 100% of the time. But your brain is very powerful, and your brain is there to keep you alive and keep you surviving, and it can override your gut feelings. So if you can just slow down when you make decisions, and check in with yourself, say, how do I feel about this? Right.
Yeah.
Before you respond, that'll hopefully keep you safe from people that don't have your best interests in mind.
After getting that report, how long did it take you? Were you immediately finished with the marriage at that point, or did it take you a while to make the separation?
It was about a year.
About a
About a
year.
year.
Okay.
That report came in September of 2017. He moved ahead of me to the Panama house in March of 2018. So that's about 6 months. And I thought that maybe I could take another 6 months of letting him finish up some stuff in the house, some tiling and some getting it ready. And I would stay behind and let him calm down and get into the sort of the flow of things down there.
Right.
And I would get a break, and then I would come down there after 6 months. But his deep fear of abandonment, which is a very serious fear with a narcissist, because they require another person to regulate themselves, to feed off of, to project upon. So he was alone those 6 months. Well, he was maybe physically alone, but he certainly was online looking for a new woman. He was looking for somebody else.
Okay.
Like I said, there's nothing I can do about that. So he actually was able to, and listen, he might have had this woman in his life for years. I'll never know the truth. If you're dealing with a narcissist, you will never know truth from false. But so he filed for divorce. Once he found and identified somebody else that he could move into the house in Panama, he filed for divorce, and she moved down there from the States too. She was.
Goodness.
Again, they might have been dating 10 years.
Yeah. You're starting to freeze up on me here. Hopefully you'll come back around. I got another question for you. Let's see. There you are. Okay. So can you talk about recognizing this in the workplace? Because I feel like more and more it's a problem in workplaces. People think it's just in their personal relationships, but like you were saying, there's a lot of power struggles, sexism. And then I feel like even amongst same sexes, there are problems with personality disorders that aren't often recognized. Have you had much experience, or can you speak to that at all?
I can speak to that, but I will say that, my experience with the personal relationship was so much more devastating than my business relationships. But one of the things that I did in my book, all right, let me go back for a second. So I hear you were going to talk about business.
Are you there? Okay.
Yeah, it just said recording stopped and recording in progress.
We're good. Right. We're good.
We'll figure out where we go from there. All right. Yeah. So when I decided to write a book to help myself actually try to figure out what had happened, and what part I played in this and how I could make sure this never happened to me again, I decided to take it all the way back to my childhood, because obviously some things happened to me as a child and throughout my life that were consistent, that set me up to be somewhat programmed to be taken advantage of by somebody like this. And it's not dissimilar in the music business or in business as well, too. So because I am who I am, somewhat codependent, grew up in a very traumatic childhood, had an alcoholic father, narcissistic mother, not a very close family. Like we're all just 4 separate people in the house, not a lot of warmth, not a lot of love, just everybody just trying to keep a lot of secrets and keep everything. All the bad stuff was being covered up. Took a lot of effort to do that. So I didn't really know what I was dealing with, in my household. And we had a lot of trauma in the house. I moved from, it was New Jersey to California, and I broke into the music business. I just got kind of lucky. I met a DJ. I love radio. I love music. Broke into it. But that was evident, what you're saying, narcissists and this sort of male-dominated patriarchal environment that I was in was obvious right away. So because I was who I was, I didn't fight back. I just didn't fight back. I felt like I was lucky to have my job, and they made sure that I felt lucky to have my job so they could keep me in my place. You're lucky to have your job. We have this many token women, right? If you look at any pictures of me online, with rock stars, and I did work all throughout the 70s and the 80s, so I got to meet a lot of really cool people. You will see pictures of maybe me and one other girl and like 25 men in the picture.
Yeah.
Because that's about the average. So I felt lucky to be there, and I took a lot of bull because of it. And there's a story in the book that's terrible. So I'm going to tell the story. If you have to edit it out, do, but this is a terrible story. So this is a serious narcissist. So I had won the Billboard Music Director of the Year Major Market Award that year.
Cool.
We were #1 in our market. I was music director and assistant PD. I had gotten so many great promotions and exclusive things for the radio station. I said, this year I'm going to ask for a raise. I'm asking for a raise, something I'd never done before because I didn't want to lose my job. God forbid, don't ask for anything. So I went in with a long list of my accomplishments to speak to the general manager about a raise. And he silently, when I asked him, gave him all my list, he silently sat there for about 30 seconds and said, sit on my face and we can talk about it.
Stop it.
No. Now, this is behind a closed door. Now, did he really mean that? Maybe. Listen, if I had said yes, the answer is probably, yeah, let's go. But, of course, he was like half kidding because it was an intimidation tactic. Right. To keep me from asking for a raise.
It's not okay. It's not funny. It's not funny.
And also that wasn't really a thing at that time. This has to be 1985 or 1986. And I do remember about a year later, that same general manager putting out a memo to everybody at the radio station saying, clear your offices of anything sexually inappropriate, because women are starting to win lawsuits for things like this. But before that, you just had to take it. So I did. I literally I ran out of his office, and I cried all the way down there, and I still didn't do anything about it. So, I was raised, and many women were raised, to just accept that role in life and somehow feel lucky that you get to participate and whatnot. And that's awful. And I've been recovering from all of those thoughts and feelings and self-perceptions for my entire life. And writing the book really helped a lot, because that helped me kind of string all of the pieces together, connect the dots to figure out, how do I check in with myself and see how I'm feeling, and then honor that feeling? And then what are the statements that I can use to let others know what I'm doing? Right. I'm honoring myself right now. And by honoring myself, I'm going to tell you that I don't like what you're saying to me, or I don't want to do that. Right. So I didn't have those words before. I didn't learn those words by example or by any kind of a mentor teaching them to me. But that's what I'm teaching myself now.
Good,
so you can teach yourself. Yeah, you can teach yourself.
That's great. Yes. Well, first of all, I'm sorry you've went through those periods of life, but I'm thankful that you are, like you said, teaching yourself and teaching others. So what is one of the things that when you have words like narcissism and gaslighting that are very important things to know, and then they get kind of mainstreamed, and I've got a great sense of humor. I'm all for a joke, but then people start using it so casually, it gets muddled and confused. Like you said, you didn't even realize that narcissism was real. How do we make sure that a post on Facebook is not real or is real? Things that people should know to delineate between the two.
That is a marvelous question. That is a marvelous question. Real narcissism, first of all, narcissism, like autism, exists on a spectrum. Everyone has some degree of narcissism as a part of their, personality. You do. You wouldn't be able to get on a microphone and talk to people and think anybody cares about what you have to say unless you had a nice, healthy dose of narcissism. I'm smart. I have something to communicate. I want to share, whatever. That's good, right? And then on a spectrum up until a disordered level. So when we're talking about a disordered level of narcissism, we're talking about pervasive behavior. This is in every aspect of their lives. You'll see people who are narcissistic treat one person one way, treat another person another way. If you see that, right, and change on a dime, right? And my husband was slow as molasses. He was like Eeyore, depressive, slow, couldn't answer a question, took 30 seconds to respond, unless he flipped that switch. And then he was lightning fast. He could talk you right down to the ground, twist your words, blame shift you, accuse you of something until you're suddenly defending yourself. So I'd say pervasive. There's, like I said, it's a spectrum. But if you hear arrogant statements, if they try to poison you against your friends and family.
As we were finishing up our conversation, the internet connection went down and wasn't going to be up for several hours, and Erin had more interviews to get to. So be sure that you check her book out wherever you can get books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble bookstores, autographed copies, and voodoo dolls available at adarkforce.com. Get her book now. Erin Riley, thanks for the great conversation.